Hi, this is Mrs. D, and today we're going to be going over order of operations. So let's go ahead and get started. When we're using order of operations, we want to use the acronym PEMDAS. So let's go ahead with the first step here. And the first step, we're going to solve all parentheses. So when we're talking about PEMDAS, the P stands for parentheses. So what that means is we're going to start at the beginning and work the problem left to right, and we're going to solve all the parentheses first. So let's go through an example of parentheses. So we have three problems here that involve parentheses. And so on the first one, over here on the left, we're going to do 12 plus 4. Well, inside parentheses, I have 12 plus 4, and 12 plus 4 is 16. So this would turn into 16 for the next step. The second one, I have 14 minus 20. Now we're dealing with our integers, and so minus 20 is the same as plus a negative 20. So that means that 14 minus 20 or 14 plus a negative 20 is going to equal a negative 6. We're going to find the difference and use the sign of the bigger number. For the third one here, we have 12 divided by 6. 12 divided by 6 is 2. So that means that on our next step, whatever is in these parentheses, we solve that first. And then this number that you solve for ends up being the next step on what happens at that part of the problem. So we'll go through some more steps here, and then we'll go through a couple of practice problems that involve all the steps. So for PEMDAS, we just talked about the P, which is parentheses. For the second step of order of operations, the E stands for exponents. So the next step, we're going to solve all the exponents. We're still going to start at the beginning and work our way left to right every single time. So here's some examples with exponents. Now, all three of these have 9 squared. So let's talk first about what the exponent means, and then I'm going to talk to you about the difference in these three problems. So 9 squared means 9 times 9. So this little 2 tells the big number how many times to multiply, and 9 times 9 is 81. The next one looks a little different because now we have a negative 9 squared. So in this case, we have 9 times 9, but we're multiplying it, or it's going to be times a negative. So 9 times 9 is 81 times a negative, or I just keep my negative in the front, becomes a negative 81. This one's a little different because the parentheses has the negative 9 inside, which means we're squaring the entire number. So on the second one, we only squared the 9 and we kept our negative in front of the problem. With this one, we're going to square negative 9. So that's negative 9 times negative 9, which equals a positive 81. So just to recap, an exponent is the number raised to a certain power, and that power tells the big number how many times to multiply. So if this was a 3, 9 cubed, or 9 to the third power, we would multiply 9 times 9 times 9. So 9 squared is 9 times 9. Negative 9 squared, if the negative is not in parentheses, means that my answer is going to be a negative 81. And if I have a negative 9 squared where the negative is in the parentheses, that means I'm squaring the entire number, negative 9 times negative 9, which is a positive 81. All right, so the first step was our parentheses. The second step was our exponents. For the third step, we're actually going to be doing multiply and divide. So that means I'm going to start at the beginning of the problem again, and I'm going to work left to right solving any multiply and divide. So it doesn't always have to be in a certain order, as long as I complete both of those throughout the same process. So here's some examples. So for this one, I'm going to work left to right. So I'm going to do 4 times 5, which is 20, and then divide that by 2, which equals 10. For the second one, now I have division first, so I'm going to do 40 divided by 8, which is 5, and then 5 times 6, which equals 30. So that means that for each of these problems, for this first problem, 10 would take the place in the next step of this entire process. 4 times 5 divided by 2. And in this case, 30 would take the actual place of this entire process in the next step. So we have parentheses, exponents, multiply and divide. And for our fourth step, we're going to have add and subtract. So that's what the A and the S stand for. Again, for add and subtract, we're going to start at the beginning and work our way left to right. So it doesn't matter if add or subtract comes first, we're going to work our way left to right. So in this first problem, we have 14 plus 6, which equals 20, and then minus 3, which equals 17. So 17 would take the place in the next step of this entire process. But since add and subtract is at the very end of PEMDAS, our order of operations, then this would probably end up being your actual answer to the problem, because that would be the last step that you have to do. So for this one right here, we have 12 minus 5, which equals 7, plus 18. 7 plus 18 equals 25. So that means 25 would take the place of this entire process. So you're working left to right. You always start at the beginning of the problem and work your way left to right for each step. So the first thing we're going to do is parentheses, then exponents, multiply and divide, and then add and subtract. All right, so now that we know the order of operations, let's go ahead and do some practice problems. So for the first practice problem, we're going to work left to right, and we're going to follow everything here in the order of operations. So the first thing we're going to do is look for parentheses. And I do have some parentheses here. I have 4 plus 7. 4 plus 7 equals 11. Now, I haven't used the 2 yet, so I'm going to keep the 2 times 11 minus 12. I'm going to go ahead and rewrite that. So now I'm going to look for exponents. I don't have any exponents, so I'm going to move on to the next step, which is multiply and divide. Again, I'm always going to work left to right, and I do have multiplication. So 2 times 11 is 22 minus 12. So now my last step is add or subtract, and I only have subtraction left. 22 minus 12 equals 10. So my answer to this one is 10. Let's try another one, number 2. So for our second example here, we have parentheses first, and I'm going to start right here. So I have 2 plus 3. So now I'm going to bring down everything I haven't used yet. So I have 30 minus, and 2 plus 3 equals 5. I'm going to go ahead and keep that in parentheses, and then I have a squared. So now that I've solved my parentheses, the next step is exponents, and I do have an exponent here. So let's go ahead and bring down what we haven't used yet. So I have 30 minus 5 squared equals 5 times 5, which is 25. And then for my last step, I'm going to do 30 minus 25, which equals 5. For our third example, we have negative 3 times 15 minus 5 plus 2 cubed. So let's start at the beginning again. And I'm going to look first for parentheses, and I do have parentheses. I have 15 minus 5. 15 minus 5 is 10. So now I'm going to bring down everything else I haven't used yet. Next thing I'm going to do is look for exponents. So I have exponents here. 2 cubed means 2 times 2 times 2. Well, 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. And then I'm going to bring the rest of this down. Next step I'm going to look for is multiply and divide. I do have multiplication here, still working. I do have multiplication here, still working left to right. Negative 3 times 10. Negative times a positive is a negative, and 3 times 10 is 30. Now I'm going to add 8. So my last step here is negative 30 plus 8. Well, these have different signs, so I'm going to subtract, and 30 minus 8 is 22. And then between 30 and 8, 30 is the bigger number, so my answer is a negative 22. We're going to do one more example here. Again, I'm going to start left to right. First thing I'm going to look for is parentheses. Now I have parentheses here, but these parentheses don't have anything inside to solve. This actually means I'm multiplying 3 times 5. So I don't have parentheses to solve. I don't have any exponents to solve. So the next thing I'm going to look for is multiply and divide. I do have multiplication here. So we have 14 minus 5 or negative 5 times 3. Well, I can just do minus and then 5 times 3 is 15. And then last I'm going to add 20. So for my last step here, I have add and subtract. I'm going to start and work left to right and go in order. So 14 minus 15 is going to equal a negative 1 plus 20. Well, negative 1 plus 20 equals 19. You want to be sure as you're using PEMDAS to solve these problems with your order of operations that not only are you starting at the beginning of the problem and working left to right for each step, but you're also going to have to worry about your integer rules. So you noticed here on this third example, down towards the bottom, we have negative 3 times 10, which means we had to multiply a negative times a positive, and we ended up with a negative 30 plus 8. So then we had to do our integer rules in order to solve the problem. Same thing with our last example. We had a negative 5 times 3, which equals a negative 15, and then I did 14 minus 15, which came out to a negative 1, and then negative 1 plus 20 ends up being 19. So I ended up subtracting those because they have different signs. Let's go ahead and recap all of our steps here. So for PEMDAS, the first step, we're going to do parentheses. For the E, we're going to do exponents for the second step. The third step is multiply and divide. And the fourth step is add and subtract. If you still need more help with order of operations, you can watch this video a couple of times and go through the examples, or you can be ready to ask some specific questions if there's something about the process you don't understand. This is Mrs. D signing off. I hope you guys have a great day. Bye.